The first and most crucial need that keeps an avoidant permanently attached to someone is finding a person who can provide deep emotional connection without threatening their sense of individual identity and autonomy. This is the holy grail of avoidant attachment, someone who loves them without trying to merge with them, who wants to share life with them without trying to control or consume their existence. For most of their life, the avoidant has experienced a false choice between connection and autonomy. Previous relationships have felt like zero-sum games, where getting close meant losing themselves, where being loved required sacrificing their independence, where commitment meant signing away their freedom to make their own choices about their time, energy, and emotional availability. But when they find someone who demonstrates that these two needs don't have to be in conflict, it revolutionizes their entire understanding of what relationships can be. This person shows them through consistent action that it's possible to be deeply loved while remaining fundamentally free, to be prioritized in someone's life without becoming responsible for their happiness, to be important to someone without losing their right to privacy and space. This person respects the avoidant's need for alone time without interpreting it as rejection. They maintain their own friendships, hobbies, and goals independent of the relationship, demonstrating that healthy people can love deeply without losing their individual identity. They encourage the avoidant's personal growth and individual pursuits rather than trying to make the relationship the center of both their lives. Most importantly, this person trusts the avoidant's judgment about their own needs and doesn't try to override their self-knowledge with external expectations about how relationships should work. When the avoidant says they need space, this person believes them rather than assuming they're running away. When the avoidant wants to process emotions privately before sharing, this person respects their timing rather than demanding immediate transparency. The avoidant realizes they can have the emotional intimacy they secretly crave without paying the price of their individual autonomy. They discover that being known deeply doesn't mean being controlled completely, that being loved consistently doesn't mean being suffocated constantly. This realization makes leaving feel impossible because they understand they've found something incredibly rare, a person who enhances their life without diminishing their selfhood. Need number 2. The need to feel emotionally safe to be vulnerable at their own pace. The second fundamental need that creates unbreakable attachment in avoidance is finding someone who provides complete emotional safety for gradual vulnerability. This means encountering a person who doesn't pressure them to open up faster than feels natural, doesn't punish them for having emotional boundaries, and doesn't use their moments of vulnerability against them later. Avoidants have typically learned that vulnerability leads to pain, exploitation, or abandonment. They've shared their inner world with people who then use that information to manipulate them, criticize them for their feelings, or left them when they revealed their authentic selves. These experiences taught them that emotional walls aren't just protective, they're necessary for survival. But when they meet someone who consistently proves that vulnerability leads to acceptance rather than judgment, to deeper connection rather than exploitation, to increased safety rather than danger, it slowly rewires their entire emotional operating system. This person demonstrates through patient, consistent behavior that sharing feelings creates intimacy rather than risk, that showing weakness builds trust rather than inviting attack. This emotionally safe person never rushes the avoidance process of opening up. They don't interpret the avoidance guardedness as a personal rejection or a sign that the relationship isn't important enough. Instead, they understand that trust must be earned gradually through consistent, safe responses to whatever level of vulnerability the avoidant is ready to offer. When the avoidant does share something personal, this person receives it with gratitude rather than immediately asking for more. They don't use vulnerable moments as leverage to push for greater emotional intimacy or as evidence that the avoidant is capable of more openness than they usually provide. They simply honor what's been shared and wait patiently for the next organic moment of connection. Perhaps most crucially, this person never weaponizes the avoidant's vulnerabilities during conflicts. They don't throw past admissions back in their face during arguments, don't use private information to win fights, and don't punish emotional honesty by making the avoidant regret their openness. This consistency proves that vulnerability with this person is genuinely safe rather than strategically risky. Over time, the avoidant begins to associate this person with emotional regulation rather than emotional chaos. Being vulnerable with them doesn't create the familiar anxiety and regret that usually follows emotional sharing. Instead, it creates relief, closeness, and a desire for more connection. This positive association becomes addictive because it allows the avoidant to experience the intimacy they've always wanted without the terror that usually accompanies deep emotional connection. The avoidant realizes they've found someone who doesn't just tolerate their emotional style, they actually create the conditions that allow the avoidant's natural warmth and depth to emerge safely. Leaving this person would mean returning to a world where vulnerability feels dangerous and intimacy feels impossible, which becomes unthinkable once they've experienced the alternative. Need number 3, the need to be seen and appreciated for who they really are underneath their defenses. The third essential need that creates permanent attachment in avoidance is being truly seen and genuinely appreciated for their authentic self rather than their defended persona. Most people in the avoidance life relate to their surface presentation, the competent, independent, emotionally controlled person they show the world. But beneath these defenses lies someone much more complex, sensitive, and capable of deep feeling than anyone realizes. When an avoidant encounters someone who sees through their walls to the vulnerable, caring, deeply feeling person underneath, it creates a profound sense of being known that they may have never experienced before. This person recognizes their sensitivity disguised as detachment, their care expressed through actions rather than words, their loyalty demonstrated through consistency rather than dramatic gestures. This person appreciates the avoidant's unique way of loving instead of criticizing them for not loving like everyone else. They understand that the avoidant shows affection through remembering details, offering practical help, and being reliably present rather than through verbal affirmations or physical demonstrations. They recognize that the avoidant's reserve isn't coldness. It's protection for a heart that feels more deeply than most people can handle. Most importantly, this person sees the avoidant's potential for growth and healing without making their love conditional on that growth happening. They love the avoidant exactly as they are right now, while also believing in their capacity to become even more open and connected over time. This combination of acceptance and faith creates the perfect environment for natural emotional evolution. The avoidant realizes they don't have to perform emotional availability to earn this person's love, don't have to pretend to be more expressive than they naturally are to maintain the connection, don't have to sacrifice their authentic way of being to meet someone else's expectations of what love should look like. They can be exactly who they are and still be cherished for it. This experience of being truly seen and appreciated for their authentic self is intoxicating for the avoidant because it's usually been their greatest fear and their deepest longing simultaneously. They've always been terrified that if someone really knew them, they would be found lacking, boring, or fundamentally unlovable. But this person knows them completely and chooses to love them anyway. The avoidant understands that this level of acceptance and appreciation is extraordinarily rare. Most people love the idea of who the avoidant could become with enough work and patience. This person loves who the avoidant actually is right now, including their limitations, their emotional style, and their need for defensive boundaries. Why meeting all 3 needs creates unbreakable attachment. When someone meets all 3 of these fundamental needs simultaneously, they become irreplaceable in the avoidant's life because they've provided something the avoidant thought was impossible: sustainable intimacy that enhances rather than threatens their well-being. This person has proven that love doesn't have to be suffocating, that connection doesn't require loss of self, that vulnerability can be safe when offered to the right person. The avoidant recognizes that finding someone else who can meet these 3 needs is extremely unlikely. The specific combination of respecting autonomy while providing connection, creating safety for vulnerability while being patient with their process, and seeing their authentic self while appreciating their unique way of loving is incredibly rare in any population, but especially rare among people who are attracted to avoidant partners. Most people who are drawn to avoidance are attracted to the challenge of breaking down their walls, changing their attachment style, or earning their love through persistence and patience. But these approaches inherently violate the avoidant's fundamental needs by pressuring them to be different than they are, pushing them to be vulnerable faster than feels safe, or trying to merge with them rather than connecting while maintaining individuality. The person who naturally meets all three needs isn't trying to fix the avoidant or change them into a different type of partner. They're simply being themselves in a way that happens to create the perfect environment for the avoidant to thrive emotionally. This natural compatibility feels like destiny to the avoidant because it requires no effort or performance. They can just be themselves and experience unprecedented levels of happiness and peace. The psychological transformation that makes leaving impossible. When these three needs are consistently met over time, the avoidant undergoes a fundamental psychological transformation that makes leaving feel like emotional suicide. They've experienced what it feels like to be loved for exactly who they are, to feel safe being vulnerable, to maintain their autonomy while enjoying deep connection. Returning to relationships that don't provide these conditions feels like voluntarily entering emotional prison. The avoidant realizes they've found their emotional home, a person and relationship dynamic that allows them to exist in their most natural, relaxed, authentic state, while also experiencing the intimacy and connection they've always secretly wanted. They understand that this isn't just a good relationship, it's the relationship that proves healthy love is possible for someone with their attachment style. This recognition creates a level of commitment and investment that surprises everyone, including the avoidant themselves. They become willing to work through conflicts they would normally run from, to communicate about issues they would typically avoid, to stay present during emotional discussions that would usually trigger their flight response. They're not fighting for this relationship out of desperation or fear. They're fighting for it out of wisdom and recognition of its irreplaceable value. The avoidant understands that losing this person wouldn't just mean losing a romantic partner. It would mean losing their faith in the possibility that love can feel safe, sustainable, and enhancing rather than threatening. They would lose their proof that they're capable of deep, lasting connection without losing themselves in the process. This is why meeting these three fundamental needs creates such unbreakable attachment in avoidance. They've found someone who loves them in exactly the way they needed to be loved, to feel safe opening their heart completely. They've discovered that their attachment style isn't a barrier to deep love. It's simply a different path to the same destination of meaningful connection and mutual growth.